Almost there.
We
Yay!
did it! Nice.
1,000 subscribers. That's super cool, guys. Thanks. If you guys want to actually support me more, I just started a Patreon. Pretty new to this, so I don't really know what I'm doing yet, so suggestions are always welcome. Currently have some behind the scenes stuff on there, as well as some pictures of upcoming videos that I'm still working on, so let me know what you guys think. And with that, let's get into this video. So with these nights, I have so much that I'm doing on these that I've actually decided that I'm just going to do bits and pieces and then have a playlist so you can go through and check out each piece as you're working on them or just want to watch. So here's how I put the LEDs in the eyes of my knights. So I start out with a small drill. That way I can get as close to center as possible with the drill, but still have a chance to kind of tweak it a little bit if I'm slightly off center. I used an awl to start with to give me a nice point for the drill to stick into so it doesn't dance around. But once I finish coming through both of these, I'm going to come in with my X-Acto knife and kind of refine where the center is. So when the next drill comes through, it'll actually follow that center point and actually not blow out the side or something. I realized on the last one that I did that there's actually a perfectly centered and sized hole in the back of these, so you can actually drill it from the back and that'll work just fine. That's only true on the Questoris style knights though, so this is kind of a more universal way to drill out eyes, and I figured I'd show you this way to do it. The larger drill that I've chosen is also slightly undersized, so I get yet another chance to come in here with my X-Acto knife and make sure that these are perfectly centered. This is something I also do with gun barrels and pretty much every hole that I make in plastic. I like to be able to get one more chance to kind of refine the center. And that'll bring us to the rest of the head part here. Now, I'm going to glue all of this in place. I'm not going to have any motion left in it, which kind of sucks, but I'm putting LEDs in it, so it's kind of the way I got to do it. So I'm going to use the head to mark the back here. Use the big drill to make sure you get as close to center as you can. And once you pull this mask off, you have a pretty good Cyberman to work with here. So we're going to drill these holes back into the cavities that are already here. Now this isn't glued together. I've kept this apart so I can actually fish the wires through. So now we got to get some LEDs soldered up. I've got a banana here for scale. These are 0402 LEDs, so they're pretty small. Once I got some wires stripped and everything kind of taped into place so it doesn't move while I solder it, I add a lot of flux and some solder. This is a very delicate procedure and it takes a long time, and let's be honest, you should just go buy pre-soldered ones. I don't know why I'm doing this. So I put a link in the description for these great pre-wired LEDs. It's much easier to do it this way. Soldering himself does have some advantages, but these ones work really well and they're kind of coated in a resin and it makes them really nice and resilient. So one of the issues with the fact that they're covered in resin is they are a little bit bigger. So when I drill these out here on the faceplate, I'm also going to have to come back with an X-Acto knife and add a little extra relief so these LEDs fit and face forward. Now the size of the wire is much smaller than the size of the LED, so I'm not going to drill the big hole all the way through. I'm going to pull out my smaller drill, and that way the wires can feed through and the LED will actually have a nice little place to sit where it doesn't pull all the way through the head. You might have noticed that I actually drilled a hole straight into the hole where these little posts come in, so I'm just going to clip them all the way off. I'm already gluing this into place, so I kind of don't need that to be mobile or to really lock into place there, and I want the space for these wires for the LEDs. So I'm going to take the point here of the LED and go ahead and bend it at 90 degrees so it's actually facing forward instead of kind of with the wires. That way when I pull it into position, it'll face forward out the eyes. Now, this does mean I have to cut an extra relief on the bottom or the top side, depending on which way I want to put these in, to make sure that they'll actually sit centered in the eyes. You might notice that I have not actually drilled these all the way through, and that's because I'm going to utilize that little cavity at the back to actually pull all 4 wires out the same little hole. I'm going to cut a little V-slot on both sides, and that way all of these wires will come out the same hole in the back, so I only have to drill one hole in the big faceplate, or the big plate where the head goes, to feed the wires into the body of the model so I can wire everything up. So I've decided that I kind of want this guy looking off to his right a little bit, so I'm going to drill a hole a little bit off to the left to actually put the LED wires through. Now, once that's drilled through, I kind of have a place to aim at, and I can always open this hole a little bit. Again, this is all going to be glued in place, so I won't have any wiggling happening that might weaken the wires. So once all these things are in place, I can thread it through that hole and glue it up. Threading these wires through is a tiny bit of a challenge because the hole isn't quite straight through because I'm using that little space there to come out the middle. So I'm going to pull out my tweezers to guide them through a little bit more. Now you might notice that I don't have the full faceplate on here yet. That's because I'm going to go ahead and pull all the wires through, not glue any of the wires in place until the faceplate's on. But this will give me a lot more time to kind of figure out exactly where these need to go and how I'm going to fit them in properly. Now that I have both LEDs in place and the kind of upper support structure that holds the head in place, all good to go, I'm going to test fit one last time with the faceplate, and it looks good. So I'm going to glue this on in place. You might notice that the LEDs aren't actually glued in place, and that's because they don't really get glued in place until the very, very end, because you never know what happens. So now the head's all done, I could just have to glue it into place. So I'm going to put a little glue here at the back so I can push that into place and that'll stick. And then I'm going to add some to the top plate here, kind of put its little captive ring on it. Not that it really matters too much because this is all going to be glued in place and almost all covered by the little cowling that goes over the top. But it makes me feel better that it's there, so I'm going to glue it in place. Now this is all together, I'm going to make sure the LEDs are nice and centered and give it one last test. Testing is really important. You want to make sure you know your LEDs don't work as soon as possible to fix that problem. This is a constant current driver piece that's on the 9 volt, so I know I won't blow out my LEDs with it, so it's a great way to test things. Now I'm going to go over here and do one little final step, and that's to mix up some epoxy resin and kind of fill in the eye lenses on the front. Now, this is going to be behind the face shield because I'm definitely doing the Imperial Knights, not the Mechanicus Knights. But what this will allow me to do is paint straight over everything and then come back with alcohol and clean the lenses a lot easier than trying to actually dig into the hole and get the LEDs clean. Well, there's no time like the present. And if you've seen my other videos, you know that I'm going super over the top with these with a bunch of LEDs. So if you want to keep up to date with that, you can always check out my Patreon, see what updates are on there. Always you can like and subscribe. I will have many more videos on these nights, and I'm going to do them in bits and pieces. So I will have a video on how I did each of the weapons, how I'm wiring the whole body together, how I'm going to power it, and probably a video on how I'm going to do all the code to make all of this stuff run. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, definitely subscribe, and thanks for watching.